get into the latest rumors around the Tennessee Titans, if you want the Titans to win in Week 3, get on the right side of that ledger, then like today's video for me right now. We have the data to prove it. More likes, more likely it is your team wins. So like the video for me right now. A little surprised we're already doing this, but this is the takes that are out there on the internet, in articles, and social media. Floated, discussed by a couple different outlets. Tennessee should bench Will Levis, make the move to Mason Rudolph. But why? I actually think it's a horrible idea for Tennessee. Because what are you actually getting out of this? We'll talk about like the Bryce Young, why Carolina did it. Because the only reason why you make this move is if you're, as the head coach, Brian Callahan, you're on the risk of losing the entire locker room. And your entire tenure is going to be a disaster. And I think that's why Carolina benched Bryce Young, who we'll actually talk about, by the way, on today's show. Do we think that has happened? Do we think Will Levis has been so unplayable that Tennessee has no choice but to put literally anybody else in there? I do not believe that is the case. Now, there are mistakes that are out there. Those 5 turnovers have been killers. And they're the bozo gene aspect of them certainly do not help much either. But I don't think you can pull the plug on this experiment 2 games in. Because there have been some good things, as Brian Callahan himself has said. There has been flashes of promise and ability and upside. And I would also argue, most importantly, he might or might not be your future. And as I've said before, a big part of this season, outside of the wins and losses, which are obviously very important, is figuring out, is he your guy? Because if he's not, you want to know to make that decision in the offseason. You don't want to have a Bryce Young thing where the supporting cast is pretty bad, who knows? Or, God forbid, a Daniel Jones thing of, well, we have no idea, because there's always an excuse for why the offense is bad. Not that you're winning games, but why the offense isn't performing well. You know what I do know? It's not Mason Rudolph. We know that. We've seen him have chances to play. He's fine as a game manager. He's a good backup. He ain't winning you playoff games. He had an elite defense in Pittsburgh, and we saw how that went. He's not a franchise QB. It's not even a slight against him. He is who he is. He might be better than Will Levis. Doesn't really matter. Because your floor and your ceiling's more important. You got to figure out what that is with Will Levis at the helm. So I don't buy this consideration at all. But what would you do? Would you even consider benching him? Y for yes, N for no. It is the pinned comment on today's video. So if the ad comes here on YouTube, take advantage of it. Head down there and let me know. Sticking on this for a little bit longer, I do like, for the record, what Brian Callahan said about the mistakes and he got caught kind of yelling at Will Levis. It's fine. Have hard coaching. It's not a bad thing. Here's what Callahan said. I just thought we had coached that one. And then to see just his instincts take over in that moment and to have it happen the way that it did was obviously clear. I was upset about it. I still am. It's not something that I think is an acceptable way to play. But I do think on the flip side is that Will had a much better game than last week. I thought a lot of the things he did, we saw improvement. That part was positive. I coach Will hard, but I do love him pretty hard too. And I think that's okay. Phrasing aside, I agree. It is a long season, lots of game left. If you want Will Levis to be great, going to need hard coaching. I think that you do need some of that, even in the modern day football world. So I am of the belief, unless it becomes so untenable you just can't play him at the risk of losing your entire, which I don't think you're even remotely at, by the way, you give Levis the season. You give Will Levis the entire year and see what he is. That way you know in December, in January, this is our guy, and we're going to keep building around him, or we're going to go in a different direction. What I don't want to do is potentially waste 2 years of like trying to figure that out. Figure it out in a year and build your roster accordingly. Today's show is made possible by our friends over at Factor Meals. It is football season. I have a wife. I have a child. We don't have time to cook the way that maybe we normally would, especially on game days. That's why I love Factor's meals. They're fresh, never frozen, and dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great-tasting meals. You've got restaurant-quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. And they're ready in 2 minutes with no shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. Head to factormeals.com/TitansChat50 and use code TitansChat50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code TitansChat50 at factormeals.com/TitansChat50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Link will be in the comment section and the description of today's show. Let's talk Bryce Young, which a couple different outlets have suggested that, including my buddy Tyler Jones on the main Chat Sports channel. Panthers have benched him. Should Tennessee have interest here? As we'll get into, I don't know about that one there, Jim. I've got real concerns about this idea of adding another developmental quarterback when you have one already. Bryce Young looks broken in Carolina. He doesn't trust his offensive line, which is not good when your offensive line allows even more pressures than Carolina's does. He just looks uncomfortable. He's not confident. It shows. Now, I think Brian Callahan could be a decent QB rehab guy, and it's not like he's expensive. Former number 1 overall pick. Because the way his contract is scaled out, I believe they've already paid his roster bonus this year. So, less than $1 million this year, 4.2 next year, 5.93 next year. That's pretty cheap. But do you believe in him? Do you think he's a better option right now than Will Levis? Or even an option that's good? So would you trade for him? Get your votes in for me in the comments of today's video. It's T for trade or P for pass. I don't see the fit right now. Young needs development. I think that is very clear. You kind of got to fix him a little bit. What's the meme? Broken but could be fun to fix. That's Bryce Young right now. I got no confidence out there. Guess what also needs development? Or I should say, who also needs development? Will Levis, who you have already invested in. And I don't really think you can develop 2 QBs at the same time. You're not going to give them the reps they need in practice. It's just, you would have to pick one. I'm going to pick the one I already committed to, that I already invested in, that knows my offense, that's had so much time spent in Tennessee. I'm not, as a sort of a Madden-style trade, hoping that the development trade for Bryce Young is better. That's not what I'm going for there. Now, we'll have more Titans videos for you guys all season long, so hit that sub button if you haven't already. YouTube.com/Titans today. Let's talk Treylon Burks trade, because this is back again. Why wouldn't it be? Bleacher Report each week does their big board of trades. It's kind of interesting to see what they think could happen and who could be available. Well, they put Treylon Burks on that list again, which, of course they did. They've been trying to trade him for months, it seems like, for if not even longer, to make that potentially happen. Burks has been not good this year. They've tried to get him the ball in some creative fashion on those runs, which I actually think is a good idea. It just hasn't worked at all. Had the one deep ball that I think he needs to be a little bit more physical that ended up being an interception. Not all his fault, not all the quarterback's fault. Sometimes that happens. Burks, with DeAndre Hopkins healthy, is a backup right now because you have Calvin Ridley. Oh, good. ESPN finally updated the photo. Thank God. It was like last week. It was a freaking Jags photo. DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd. Then there's Burks. Here's my mindset. It's not just a one-to-one proposition. You have to think about some roster building here, right? I'll get into what I mean by that in just a second. But you have the depth available that you really want. Kind of doubting it from that perspective. So would you trade Treylon Burks? 1 for yes, 0 for no. Get those votes in for me in the comments of today's show. I'm going to acknowledge this off the front here, or I guess in the middle of this part, but the first part of this conversation. Maybe this is me falling for the sunk cost fallacy, where you invested in him, you don't want to give up on him quite yet. But also, what are you going to get for Treylon Burks? I don't think this is a situation where you're getting a good pick. You're getting what? A mid to late day 3 pick at best? You're getting a 6th rounder? That's fine if you want to go full on fire sale, but you have a new regime in there. Aren't you better off keeping him and having depth at wide receiver and hoping he develops still? Would I rather have a 6th round pick or Treylon Burks? Maybe it's Treylon Burks still. And it means I don't have to give NWI snaps, which I don't really know if I want to do. God forbid Hopkins goes down. He probably ends up going down as a bust, to be quite honest. But I think I'd rather keep that door open for different coaching staff getting more out of him and receiver depth than taking pick 195. I don't have a great faith in thinking that's worth it in the middle of a season.